here we go. Let's take a look at this real quick. Federal study ties 1918 flu pandemic to Nazi Party gains. So now, typically, guys, what ends up happening here is that the rise of the Nazi Party is usually put down to like the Treaty of Versailles, which undeniably I think you can argue that this still maintains true. However, I think that there is a pretty good argument here that the 1918 flu pandemic also helped to radicalize the Weimar Republic towards Nazism. So it was like this is another piece of the puzzle to understanding like the complexities of international politics, and yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about this because it's an interesting little article. Um, so. A new academic paper produced by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York concludes the deaths caused by the 1918 influenza pandemic profoundly shaped German society in subsequent years and contributed to the strengthening of the Nazi Party. I think that this is relevant for a lot of reasons in the face of fascism, but yeah, we'll take a. I'll link the study in chat. We can. So a 2020 pandemic can radicalize to socialism? Yes, exactly, Nathaniel, because in times that radicalize people, this is both an opportunity for the left and the right. However, problem is if the right wins, you're basically fucked. So let's not lose. To basically go over it quickly, essentially the paper comes to the conclusion, the Spanish flu. The paper basically comes to the conclusion that essentially, though the 1918 flu started in Kansas, or at least there's a lot of evidence to indicate that it started in Kansas, the issue is that when a population is hit by a pandemic, or at least in the case of the 1918 pandemic, spending per resident of that country declined significantly for the next decade. So essentially what happened with Germany was that Germany lost World War I, was saddled with the Treaty of Versailles, and on top of having like those economic responsibilities, I guess, they were also dealing with the aftermath of the 1918 influenza pandemic, which killed like over 250,000 people in Germany. And essentially, that led to less spending for the decade after the 1918 pandemic passed, which meant that when they were saddled with the Treaty of Versailles, they were also saddled with less spending per resident of Germany. And on top of that, because this is something that primarily affected the young, it meant that the young population in Germany was in a position to be radicalized to the left and the right. This is why the Communist Party rose up in prominence, and the socialists rose up in prominence in the Weimar Republic. This is also why the Nazi Party was able to gain a foothold. Because as part of this radicalization, the Nazi Party was able to tap into the vein of resentment that was caused by a number of different factors. And on top of that, the general position ended up being that the communists and the socialists weren't able to compromise, and they were then isolated and destroyed by the Nazis. I think maybe there are some good lessons here for where we're at right now. I just in my humble opinion, I think that we need to take advantage of the radicalization towards the left, but not to such an extent that it destroys our country. Because if that happens, then you know who fills in the power vacuum? Usually ain't us. Historically, it ain't the left. Yeah, exactly, Derby. This is why they called themselves National Socialists, because they wanted to brand themselves in a way that would appeal to socialists. Exactly. So this is a pretty good overview. I'll post that in chat as well. You guys can look at that. This was my case for voting Biden. Yeah, irked. This was essentially my case for voting Biden as well. We have to have bourgeois democracy intact if we want to be able to persevere through bourgeois democracy. And I'd much rather do that than fighting in a violent revolution that could go in a lot of different directions. All right.